Hi, and welcome back to Nourishing Maine at Dragonfly Cove Farm here in Dresden. I'm Marge Kilkelly.
I'm Mary Kate Rennie, and today we are going to do all things eggs.
It is the time of year for eggs. The girls are very busy.
Well, your girls are very busy. Look at these beautiful eggs.
We have one Araucana chicken, so you can see that there's a couple of blue eggs in there. And when my husband packages the eggs, often what he tries to do is have one blue egg in each dozen when we can.
For good luck.
For good luck, that's right. It's a fun thing.
It is.
So today we're going to talk about quiche and frittata, which are both similar in similar origins, but they have differences. The quiche has a crust, a frittata doesn't. Quiche is something that comes sort of Germanic French heritage, and frittata is Italian.
Frittata.
There you go.
There we go.
And one of the things that I've done with quiche for a long time, rather than doing a pastry crust for it, I do a shredded potato crust.
Which I love because we were both talking about this recipe yesterday, and we were both bemoaning the fact that nobody likes a soggy bottom crust. And when you use a regular crust, it's easy for that to happen because there's so much moisture in a quiche. And so this little rendition is really, well, it adds so much flavor, but it's a great way to avoid that.
It also is a wonderful thing if you are serving a large group of people, and it has, when you're eating it, there's this feeling of having a wonderful base of home fries underneath. And so you've got the home fries and the eggs and the other things you put in it. So we are going to start by shredding potato, and what I want is to get to 2 cups of potatoes, and I use my handy dandy shredder. I've washed the potatoes, but I never peel potatoes.
And that's what we were talking about, because I always tend to peel potatoes for hash browns or anything else you use shredded potatoes for, but we didn't, and it's such a great flavor. Now I won't do that again. There's no reason to do it. And while you're doing that, I can measure out a little bit of the spices, and we can talk about what a difference that makes.
Yep. So what we're going to use in here, because I want to elevate this crust so that it's not just potato, but really add some flavor to it. So we're going to put in garlic powder and onion powder, as well as salt and pepper. And the garlic powder and the onion powder are lovely because they really blend in. I mean, I've got plenty of onion, as you know, I love onion, but the powder makes a difference when you're doing this kind of a product. So I would like to get a ½ teaspoon of onion powder.
I am on it.
And a ½ teaspoon of, and you can actually just put it right in there.
Will do. So I'm starting with the garlic.
And again, if you want more of that, you can. I mean, it's pretty flexible, but that is one that works well for us.
It really does add a really great flavor. I like that hash brown analogy.
Yes.
And it's a ½ teaspoon of each.
Yep. I'm going to get to 2 cups of shredded potato.
Right.
Is what I'm looking for.
Right. And that's for
That's for like a 9-inch square. I don't use a pie plate for this quiche, and there's a real reason for that. When this potato crust has to be pre-baked, and when you're pre-baking it, one of the things that happens is it will shrink. And if you put it in a regular pie plate, it will shrink so that the crust is only on the very bottom. If you put it in a square dish and pull it all the way to the top, when we take it out of the oven, you'll see that what it does is it does shrink some, but it doesn't shrink so much that it's a problem. I'm going to go to a different potato before I end up.
Want me to take over?
Including my
knuckles?
my knuckles in it, which I don't want to do.
That's not funny.
This is a very basic quiche. I've got rendered bacon, which is not crispy. It's just rendered. It's nice and soft, and a good flavor, and the fat has come out of it. But it isn't one that is it's crispy. And I've cooked that with some onions. So I've got 1 medium onion and about a ½ cup of bacon. The other thing that I do with this recipe is that I will use bacon ends, and if you go to the store, you'll often find packages of bacon ends that are less expensive than buying regular strips of bacon. And this is a great recipe for that. You don't need a strip of bacon, you're going to cut it up anyway, so why not use odds and ends?
Right.
Why don't you see where we are here?
Well, and I won't put it in the pan until we get our spices in there. Yep, you got probably that potato left.
All right.
Maybe a little bit more.
Again, we measure very, very carefully.
Well, like you said, you don't want it being too low because then,
Yeah.
the custard, if you will be on top of that. And that was another difference between the frittata and the quiche that we discussed yesterday as far as, flavor and texture. I couldn't believe, I always thought they were pretty much just an egg pie, kind of. But the fact is, a quiche, when done correctly, is very custardy. And a frittata is just as delicious, but it's more like an open-faced omelet almost. And you can put as much or as little ingredients as you'd like. But it seems to me, at least when I make a frittata, it's kind of like the kitchen sink Sunday morning brunch kind of a omelet to serve a lot of people. But the quiche can do the exact same thing, but boy, is it just a smoother texture. And I never really knew how big a difference they could be.
Part of that is the fact that part of the cheese is going to go into that custard, and then part of the cheese is going to go on top of it. So we're going to add those spices, and then I'm going to step over and get the flour.
Mm-hmm. She's doing that. I'm just stirring them together like you would.
Doesn't it smell good already?
It does. It just blooms. Don't lose any. And then we'll spin that. And you need a half a cup.
Quarter cup.
Quarter cup. Half of that.
And there we go. Quarter cup of flour. And the reason for the flour is that it binds this crust together.
And it needs it.
And it does need it. Yes, absolutely.
And it does come together with the starch in the potatoes and that flour. It really does start to become what you want it to be. And it doesn't need a whole lot as long as the spices are mixed. And,
that's right.
And we want to spray this.
Yes, spray that for me.
That is one little tidbit that's important.
Yeah, if you don't grease the baking pan for this, you will find yourself really digging it out.
Yeah, and you don't want to miss it.
No. And again, I mean, this
you
just
can use olive oil or any other kind of way you grease
anything.
the pans. Yeah.
So now I'm just going to put it in here.
Yeah.
And then just press it around. And you can see it stays together nicely.
It really does.
It does. And again, I use 2 cups of potato for this. If you really like the potato flavor and you want it thicker, you can. If you want it thinner, just make a little less.
I mean, want a taller plate, you could do it a taller wall in your potato.
Yeah.
And it's easy to get too much in the corner, so it's really just a fun little build.
And don't worry about, if you look and you say, oh, well, I can still see the plate down through there. Don't worry about it, it's okay. The egg is going to go in there and it's going to be lovely.
There you go.
All right.
And the one thing we do need to do is we need to pre-bake this, which is what we're going to do now. And then while it's cooking, we can definitely make the custard.
We will do that.
Okay.
So this is going to go in an oven, 350 degrees for about 20 minutes. And I mean, there are 2 ways to look at it. One, you want it to be a little bit brown, but you also want it to sort of have that great hash brown smell to it.
Mm-hmm. And it is going to cook again, so it doesn't need to be totally crispy.
And there it goes.
And now we get to use some of your beautiful eggs.
We do.
And we're going to use...
We are going to use 6 eggs.
Yeah. And these are these smallish?
They are.
So,
these are the new girls. These are pullet eggs. They will get larger as the girls grow. And if you're buying eggs at the store, you can just look at size. I mean, these would probably be medium to large for store eggs, but we don't think of them as being that big.
You saw that we didn't purposely crack them on the glass here because it's easy for a shell to get inside. I cracked it here, I believe, and so did you.
Yeah, and there are times when what I'll do is I will crack it into a separate dish and then put it in.
But when you crack it and get a shell in your eggs, which we all do, the way to scoop it out with the most ease I have found is using the shell of it because there's some affinity, can't explain it, but if we had a little piece of shell, which I'm not going to add, if you go for it, it's so much easier to scoop out than with a stainless spoon or anything like that.
We're going to do 3/4 of a cup of cream and a 1/4 cup of milk. So I'm going to just measure them both into one measure because why not?
Okay, you tell me when.
Yep, well, it's going to be full.
When?
There you go. When? Okay. And we're going to just scramble these just the same way that you would scramble eggs if you were making scrambled eggs.
And once those are mixed, and you know when they're pretty blended.
Yeah, look at that.
They're
gorgeous.
Yeah, and this is when we add all the other little tasty ingredients.
Things.
So cheese first?
Yes.
So this is a cup of cheddar.
Yep. 1 cup of cheddar grated up. And there's another 1/2 cup of cheddar that goes in this recipe. And that 1/2 cup is going to go on top after we put this into our crust, our cooked crust. We're going to add green onion. And about a 1/2 cup of green onion.
And this is Marge's green onion that we got from her little kitchen garden outside. And the chives as well were just the first spring greens, and they're so delicious in this recipe. The whole cup.
You know, it sort of feels like the first vegetable of the year. I put them in everything. And I think this time of year they have a particularly lovely flavor.
And I don't know if that's because our palate is so starved for something fresh and bright, but you can smell the difference, and it may be the youth of the onion or the craving of something.
Stove, I have already cooked 1 medium onion and about a 1/2 cup of bacon. And that can go right in there.
And the onions are translucent, they're not too soft. And the bacon, as you'll see, is just render, not crispy. And that's where all the flavor just gets released into the both of them. And you put these right inside. Don't want to miss any. Okay.
And now,
I think that
looks great.
it does look great.
And we are ready to take the cooked crust out of the oven.
Yep, it was about 20 minutes at 350. Not completely crusty, but ready for this beautiful center to fill it up.
So again, one of the things I told you is that it will shrink. It does shrink down, and that's perfectly fine. I haven't figured out a way to not have it shrink down. But it's still delicious, and that's part of the reason that I also make it a little bit heavier on the edges.
And every piece gets a nice bottom.
Oh yeah.
Just like a good quiche.
It's lovely.
Pouring it?
Pouring it.
All right.
Oh, so good.
Perfect size.
Yep. Now we're going to take the 1/2 cup of cheese that we set aside, and instead of scattering it on the cutting board, I'm going to put it in the quiche.
Pour this, I can get already.
And this is ready to go back in the oven for its second cooking.
And that goes in for, I want to say, a 1/2 hour at 350, maybe longer.
Yeah, maybe.
And you can test the temperature if you'd like to make sure that it's set. You can kind of tell, but you don't want to overcook it. That is the one, if we're going to think of something that could wreck either one of these recipes we're doing today, overcooking might be the worst thing that can happen.
Absolutely.
And it's hard to tell sometimes.
And one of the things, again, in doing our research before the show, is that the temperature should be at 165. And it's interesting because when we've done that, it really did come out perfectly, and the cheese was just melted and everything was very soft and lovely. And I always like having a temperature to back up me looking at it and thinking about, oh, does that look done or not?
And we also think that eggs do cook once they're in a hot pan. So it's kind of scary. If it still has a little jiggle, if you've got that temperature, that's going to back you up. It'll set as it rests.
And it keeps cooking.
It does.
Let's start on a frittata.
Great, let's do it. So we're going to cook the frittata in the fry pan. And we're going to start with browning onions in butter and then build the different ingredients. And while I'm getting that started, I think you're going to build the custard for it. All right. So my butter is almost melted perfectly. Sure is. I'm going to add the onion and get these cooking. And I'm going to be cooking the onions till they're translucent. And then I'll add the asparagus, which is the second most dense one that needs the time to cook. Then I'll add this fresh scallions from the garden. And then last but not least, we'll wilt the spinach. And then we'll have a good bunch of vegetables to put on the bottom of the fry pan, which is already hot, which really helps cook the frittata pretty quickly. But this is what we're going to serve the frittata in. So we'll be pouring the custard that Marge is building over all the veggies.
So we've got eggs, and we're going to put in 1/3 of a cup of cream. So a much lesser amount of cream than we had in the quiche, but just enough to give it a little bit of lift. 1/3 of a cup.
Yeah, we have 2 different kinds of cheeses that are going in here as well.
And what kinds of cheese are those?
They're Gruyere and Swiss. And the reason we picked these particular, ingredients is because they're just so fresh with the asparagus and the other green onions. And these ones are just very mild cheeses, but depth of flavor for sure.
I'm going to put a little bit of pepper in here, but probably not salt because you've got salt in all your cheeses.
We
How's
do.
that?
Yep.
Fresh ground pepper, what could be better?
And the frittata is more of a quick bake than the quiche because this stove is hot and the fry pan, as I'll cast iron, the pans are fabulous and retain all that heat. It'll probably be 20 minutes at 350 in the oven. So it's doing a lot of the cooking here. And it's basically when we pour the custard into this pan and the eggs start to cook right away.
Yep.
Yeah. So the onions are browning. I'm going to give it another minute. And then I'll add the asparagus, and that won't take long at all to cook.
It smells so good.
It does.
We always say that, but it's
I
so
know.
true. There's nothing
Yes.
like the smell of cooking.
I know.
We've had all these heavy foods all winter long, and people are sort of tired of those, and it's really not time for summer food yet. And so, it really is an interesting time to get creative and do things a little bit differently. And so we looked at eggs. We thought, well, it's sort of a nice transition. Because, we don't eat that much quiche in the wintertime maybe, and springtime is a good time to do that. And the frittata is just such a lovely, Sunday breakfast or even dinner. With a salad, it's a perfect dinner.
It is. In goes the asparagus.
Yep.
And this will be, just let it steam a little bit.
And I love the green.
I know. It gets brighter and brighter the hotter.
It does.
Yeah.
And then the spinach is so funny because as soon as the spinach hits heat, it just sort of goes poof.
It does.
There's nothing like buying a giant bag of spinach for dinner and you think, oh, that's so much spinach.
Yes.
And then you cook it and it's like not really that much at all.
And the other fun thing about quiche and frittatas is that you can ad lib a little bit. Like you saw me put a cup of onions, chopped onions, but because these delicious scallions are so young, they just add flavor. It's not a lot of heat. So if it seems like a lot of onions, it's just right.
And in the quiche, whatever you've got, you can put crab meat in it. Crab quiche is amazing. You can do leftover cooked salmon. You can, put ham in it. Whatever kinds of things you want, or you can make it vegetarian. That's perfectly fine too.
Yeah.
Big.
All right. So this is definitely getting where we want it. Give it another 30 seconds, and then we'll put the spinach on there.
Yep.
So you see the onions are translucent. The asparagus is that bright, beautiful green, as are the onions. The spinach, I'm going to go with a handful.
That's fine. Probably start with a handful, and then it's all going to go away. And
And
you go,
it'll
I
be
need another handful.
And this wilts quite quickly, and that'll probably be enough.
Another part that's important in terms of cooking vegetables this way is to really think about which vegetables take longer to cook, which don't take as long to cook.
Exactly.
And that's a really important piece, which is why the order that the vegetables have gone in has been really important.
Thank you for mentioning yes.
That actually looks like the right amount of spinach, I think.
I know.
Yeah. You want to bring it over here?
I do.
Okay.
And put it right on there.
Yeah, put it right on here.
All right. So here we are. Everything's still pretty bright, not completely done on purpose. And I'll put it right here. And then the pan is piping hot, and it's going to go into a piping hot oven, which really is the reason why it's such a short cooking time. Marge had mentioned it's a really good idea to spread the custard, if you will, around the way she's doing it. It does need to open up, the vegetables to the eggs and make sure that there's air and it's distributed properly.
And you don't want to find a pocket where you've got you know, a lot of vegetables and the egg hasn't gotten through. So now we're going to put tomatoes.
Yes, and I'm going to show you that this side of the frittata is already cooking like you would expect it, you know, an omelet to. So this pan is doing its trick.
Yep.
And then we're going to add these beautiful
Yep.
tomatoes on top. Spread them around like you would a pinwheel, or any way you'd like. We were concerned about, or thinking about, how much moisture a tomato brings to this whole recipe, and you can definitely de-seed them or take some of that out. This tomato, we use small tomatoes, so these weren't too wet.
They weren't. And if you use a plum tomato, paste tomato, it's going to have even less liquid in it.
Just a little flour for spring.
There you go.
I love the chives
Sprinkle,
on top.
sprinkle, sprinkle.
Yes.
And then this is going in the oven.
Yes. Okay, well, before I put this in the oven, I am going to add the goat cheese now. It needs to melt and it will be delicious. And you can do it any way you'd like. I just love the contrast of the red, the green, the yellow. It's just so pretty.
Sort of looks like an Italian flag.
What do you know?
How
I wonder.
appropriate is
I know.
that?
That was on us.
It also gives sort of a nice sharpness.
The tartness that goat
Yeah.
cheese has will be delicious with this. All
It will.
right. I think we're ready. Okay.
I think we are.
All right. I'm going to do the honors. I'm going to rinse off my hands.
All right.
Thank
I
you.
will put it in.
Great.
In the oven she goes.
Great.
So we have cooked a lot of food with eggs.
How many eggs? Is it 2 dozen?
It's something like that.
Almost.
But look how many eggs we have left.
No wonder you're everybody's best friend this time of year. So what are we going to do with them?
Well, I bet there's a Joe way for that.
Of course there is. Let's see.
Welcome back to the Joe Way. Today, being a frugal farmer, we have a flock of chickens, and every so often they go into a fit and lay a whole lot of eggs. And then other parts of the year they don't. So what we do to cover that is we'll take and freeze them. In order to freeze eggs when you have a massive amount, is you crack 4 of them into a bowl, making sure that you don't break the yolk and you don't put any shells in with it. You get all of them in there. And we do 4 at a time because that just works well for most recipes. It also gives you 4 for breakfast if you want it. Now what we do is we take a Ziploc bag, a 1/2 teaspoon measure. We take a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, put in the bag. What we do is we take and we poke the yolk with a skewer without stirring it up, trying to leave it intact as much as possible. You can see that one that I just did indented, the yolk indented before the skewer went in. That's what you want to do. You want to make sure that the skewer goes in. What that does is it gives it so that when it freezes, it will stay shape, and then when you thaw it out, it will maintain its shape. Then you want to put your bag over the bowl, pour them into the bag, roll them around a little bit so you get salt all over them, the salt that you put in the bag. And then you try to get as much air out of the bag. Once you get it down and you start seeing the fluids coming out to the zip, you zip it up, and then you just lay them into the freezer, in your freezer, and they'll freeze, and you can keep them up to a year. They stay good for up to a year in the freezer. As long as you freeze, it doesn't shut off. And that's the Joe way for eggs. Have a good day. Bye.
Thanks, Joe. I guess we'll be eating eggs for a long time.
Good thing there's so many things to do with them.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
So many things.
I know.
We're ready.
Okay.
I think it's time to sample.
I want to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
So here's the quiche. Doesn't that look lovely?
It's so golden brown.
Yeah.
It's delicious.
And it just, I mean, the smell, it's home fries and eggs and bacon and onions.
You know, I never thought of it that way because I've never used a potato crust in my quiche. So it is a, a breakfast in a bowl.
And there
Ooh,
is a frittata.
look at them. They're beautiful.
They're gorgeous. They're just gorgeous.
Yeah,
I think it's time.
All
This
right.
is the funnest part of what we do, isn't it?
it is.
Sure.
And I'll do this one.
All right.
All right. I'm going to try to get a wedge with my tomato in every one.
There you go. And you can see the crust on there and all those wonderful things. And it's just nice and soft.
Yeah. And this is,
Oh, that's perfect.
yes. See,
Swap
and you can
plates.
tell. Yeah, let's. And you can tell the custard texture of the quiche is just so light and fluffy and quite different than, as I said, more omelette-y
Yeah.
eggs. Yeah. Both perfect for breakfast
Or lunch.
or lunch
dinner.
or snacks.
The other thing that I really like about this particular quiche recipe using the potato is that it's lovely as a leftover. You know, if you have made it and you've got some left over, it's great to reheat it the next day. Just perfectly fine. It's time.
All right. How about you try the quiche?
All right.
I'll do the frittata, and we can compare notes. I know.
Isn't that great?
Not overdone, which is easy to do, at least for me, with the frittata. And then the quiche, my goodness.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
And I love the
Smooth.
cheeses. I love the cheeses on yours. Mm-hmm. Just great. And all the vegetables.
I know. This is a great
So
use
there
of
you are.
lots of eggs.
Lots of eggs, lots of ways to use eggs. They're delicious. It's different. It's a great spring breakfast, lunch, or dinner. And there you go.
Yeah. So the quiche again had 2 cups of shredded potato in the crust, and we added all those yummy spices all together so that they can get ingrained. Salt, pepper, onion powder, garlic powder, ½ teaspoon of each of those. And a medium onion goes in your part. So the separate part, the custard part, was onions, scallions, 1.5 cups of cheese, cheddar.
A ½ cup of bacon, 1 medium onion. I sauteed those. I put a cup of the cheese in with the eggs and the milk. And then we put that into the crust and then put the cheese on top and baked it that way.
There you go.
Yep.
And the frittata was a lot simpler, although similar ingredients. It all came in one pan. We put a tablespoon of butter in the fry pan. It all ends up in here. We cooked the onions, 1 medium onion, and then layered the different vegetables after that. So the onion takes the longest. Then we added the asparagus, and then we added the fresh green onions, and then we added the handful of spinach.
Yep.
It went pretty quickly.
It did go very
It
quickly.
did. While Marge was making the custard of 8 eggs, a 1/4 cup cream, 1/4 cup milk. If you want to just use milk or use cream, whatever you have is really fine. Yep. I used 4 ounces of Swiss and 5 ounces of Gruyere, and then salt and pepper.
And the goat cheese on top.
The goat cheese on
The
top.
tomatoes and goat cheese on
the-
top.
And it's not decoration. The tomatoes are important.
They are important.
For this recipe, but they do look like decoration too.
They do.
And then sprinkling of chives on top.
It's nice to have both.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us on Nourishing Maine and talking eggs with us.
They're delicious.
I'm Marge Kelly here at Dragonfly Cove Farm.
And I'm Mary Kate Rennie. And thank you
From Nourishing Maine.